Hello and welcome to this episode of Star Wars Generations. Today, myself, Matthew, along with Erin McGowan and Alex Corman, are going to be breaking down our rankings of all of the 11 live-action Star Wars movies. If you've been paying attention to our podcast, you've heard that we're starting to do the, movie-by-movie breakdowns and discussions, looking at it from the three different perspectives that each of us have, being, different backgrounds, perspectives, generations, all of that. We actually had recorded an episode on how we rank all of them. We did have some technical problems related to that first episode, so we're running that one back again. So if this seems a little bit out of order, that's why. But we're still going to have an awesome conversation about, where do we rank these movies? Because to me, one of the things that I'm most excited about with this podcast that we're doing, especially having Erin and Alex's voices on it now as my co-hosts, I mean, I do a lot less of the work, but more importantly, is just realizing how much my particular understanding of how I see these movies is really set by how I experience them, and getting to hear from others, getting to talk to others about how they experience them is really changing things a lot for me, and I hope for a lot of listeners. And so we're going to do these rankings at our beginning of our kind of walk down memory lane with the movies. We're going to do them again at the end just to kind of see how much things have changed and bring you guys along with us. So let me start by just letting my two co-hosts introduce themselves. Erin, go ahead.
Hey, yeah, I'm Erin. What's it called? I'm affectionately
McGowan.
known at... Oh, thank you. But no, I was going to say I'm affectionately known as the child on this podcast, which I fully claim. Yeah, I'm just really excited to get into this. As Matthew said, we had some technical difficulties. What they meant by that is that Alex did not record the podcast, which means...
You know what? I was going to admit it myself, but just call me out. It's fine.
I will. I was just going to say, congratulations. You're a real podcaster now. You wouldn't be a real podcaster if you didn't accidentally delete or not record something.
That is true. I was not going to throw you under the bus, but Erin makes a good point.
I was going to throw myself under the bus, so it's fine.
Okay, go ahead. Introduce yourself.
Oh, okay. Well, hey, everyone. I'm Alex Corman, and I am the one who messed up. I'm also very excited to rank the movies a second time. I feel like my thoughts are clear, and I have more poignant arguments to throw at Matthew about why Revenge of the Sith is the best movie ever made. But it's going to be great.
I'll just say, though, I think it's interesting to hear where we all rank these and discuss them. I'm not here for arguments. I'm just here to kind of, feel out what you guys are saying and occasionally tell you why you're wrong. So let me also just say we're going to be giving them the ranking. We're doing all 11 of the live-action movies. That's the 3 trilogies plus Solo and Rogue One. And at least for myself, putting things in rankings is always hard. It can be a little bit, flexible back and forth. And I at least specifically have tiers of these couple are just, I can rank them, but they're all so close to each other and they're all really at the top, really at the bottom, stuff like that. If you guys have that as well, that's awesome. But if not, that works too. So let me just start out here. Mr. Corman, what is your bottom movie? What's your number 11?
Yeah, even though I am a child of the prequels, I will have to put Attack of the Clones at the bottom of the barrel here. While I truly love, having grown up in the era of the prequels, and I like them more. I have a fonder place in my heart than most people. Attack of the Clones just fails in more areas than any other movie for me. Now, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love, the Battle of Geonosis, the scenes on Camino, those are great. But outside of that, it's a flaming hot piece of shit. I mean, if we're being honest, you go from the awkward conversations and kind of gaslighting, questionable, predatory behavior of Anakin towards Padme, and then you have the never-ending scene in the droid factory, and it just none of that hit with me or connect with me at any level. And I feel like the last 30 minutes of a movie can't redeem the first hour and a half of just not being good. I think that Ewan McGregor is still a shining light as he is in every prequel movie, but it definitely is going to have to rank at the bottom of my list.
That's fair. Yeah, it is. I have a bottom tier of the bottom 2, and it's not my absolute bottom, but it's in there for pretty much all the reasons you just talked about.
Yeah, well, what's your bottom, Matthew?
So my bottom, and this is kind of a good way to introduce a I think kind of like interesting question about how we rank movies is because I thought a lot about this in terms of like, am I looking at which one is just the best movie versus which one is the best Star Wars movie, and which is the like, does it contribute or even a few cases like do actual harm to, I think, the overall Star Wars story? Because I think Attack of the Clones, for all the things you just said, it does add a lot to the Star Wars story. You know, it helps us understand how the clones started and the Clone Wars and all that kind of thing. It does a horrible job of explaining the romance. Every now and then I see one of those posts where it's like, God, how could Padme have said like, oh, I don't love you, Anakin, I don't want to kiss you, but then worn these really sexy dresses? And it's like, guys, that's not, like, people can wear whatever the hell they want. That's such awful, like, way of viewing that. Yeah. But it's how Anakin views it, for sure. But to me, it is still like, it adds to the Star Wars canon a lot of things that I think are positive. So it's in my bottom tier. It's not my absolute last, though. My last, because I think it's actually kind of the polar opposite, is Rise of Skywalker. Rise of Skywalker, to me, I think as someone who doesn't like Star Wars, if you just watch Rise of Skywalker, it is a far better movie than Attack of the Clones. The dialogue, the acting, the cinematography, the directing are all like, you know, medium to good. Like, they're great. That all that is fine. I just think it is so like, I love the sequels except for that one. I love Rey. I love Finn. I love all these characters. I just feel like Rise of Skywalker does so much harm to the canon. Like, it just takes so many of the great ideas from Last Jedi and totally ignores them. It brings back Palpatine for no reason whatsoever, just to kind of make all the stuff that Vader did feel more invalid. It didn't ruin my childhood. It doesn't take away my enjoyment of any of the movies any less. I think it's perfectly fine for me to be like, it's just not the movie I'm ever going to watch again, because I just don't care for it until we review it. But yeah, so for those reasons, like, Rise of Skywalker is my bottom, but I think it has a lot to do with, like I said, if you asked me to do these rankings based on which is the best made movie, it would be Attack of the Clones. But if you ask me which is the worst Star Wars movie, it's Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah, I also have Rise of Skywalker at my bottom for a lot of the same. Alex is so annoyed right now. For a lot of the same reasons as you, Matthew. I feel like it really abandoned so much of what was good about the sequels, and what it did to Finn and Rose is just horrible. Yeah. They were just ignored for a big part of the movie. But that being said, I am really excited for this rewatch because I've only seen Rise of Skywalker once. So I am excited to be proved wrong in some way, to like learn more about this film and see what good there actually is, because I have been biased in my mind for so long. I'm like, it didn't end the sequel trilogy how I wanted it to, therefore I don't really want to think about this movie more. Yeah. But like you're saying, there's a lot of good parts to it also, so I'm interested to rewatch.
And I will just add, I do know that, like you, I think I have some bias there, and part of it is that Last Jedi, as we all know, was an incredibly controversial movie. And it was very hard to watch Rise of Skywalker after we'd had 2 or 3 years, or, 2 years, maybe it was a year, however long, start that again. And so it was very hard for me to watch Rise of Skywalker after having seen a big part of the fandom become very toxic in attacking Last Jedi in all these ways, and then see this movie that seemed to have listened to them. And seemed to have, like, as you said, completely ignored Rose and completely ignored Finn and ignored a lot of the things that the toxic parts of the fandom were hating most about The Last Jedi. And so I think that also colored my viewing of it a good deal in terms of, like, I just was kind of mad at Disney for what it felt like to me being cowards and giving in to this horrible part of the fandom. There's nothing wrong with not liking Last Jedi, but I think we can agree on the toxicity of it. And maybe for me, seeing it again after a couple of years, I'll feel differently. But we'll see. What about for you, Alex? What's your number 11? Or do you want to just talk about our thoughts on Rise of Skywalker, or where do you want to jump into this?
Rise of Skywalker is not in my bottom 3, so I mean, I can talk about it now, or I can talk about it later.
Give us a quick thing. Just give us a quick response to our words, and then you can get into it more.
Well, I disagree, frankly. I personally feel like, and I know that, and Matthew and I have discussed this in the past, but I have found that Rise of Skywalker, to me, took a lot of the kind of the risks that were taken in the last season of Rebels and put them on the big screen. You explored a lot of like the kind of weird lore. In none of the live action movies had we really explored like, you know, the level of Sith like history and lore that's explored in this movie. And like, I know everyone makes fun of the fact that Palpatine came back, and sure, I get the fact that like they could have definitely given a better explanation than somehow Palpatine returned. And I believe they're now currently backfilling it through the various live action shows. But I really felt like, you know, we have to remember Rise of Skywalker preceded everything except for like The Mandalorian. Mm-hmm. And I think that, you know, while it wasn't perfectly executed, I think the Rise of Skywalker exploring a lot of those more far out there topics, like, opened the door for what we got in Ahsoka. Like, I felt like Rise of Skywalker walked so Ahsoka could run. I mean, like, I don't think if that movie hadn't been made, we could really start diving into some of like the expanded universe concepts we're seeing in Ahsoka right now. And I think that Palpatine returning, while yes, I get, Matthew, that it a little bit invalidates what Anakin's redemption arc did. However, it just makes sense that he was the big bad. He was obsessed with power and living forever through all of the films, all of the books, all of everything. And for him to not have had like a plan in place to clone himself when he has access to Kaminoan technology, to not have a plan in place in case he dies, I feel it could be out of character for him because he's so good at thinking like 5 moves ahead. So to me, that just made sense. I thought it was a really fun adventure. It was like the first time in a while that we'd just gotten the whole cast of characters adventuring like fully together. I mean, in The Last Jedi, they're all kind of doing their own thing. You know, I think that you have Poe, Finn, Rey, 3PO, R2, Chewbacca, the whole gang just going on one fun little adventure. It felt like it was just a fun ride for me. And I also, while yeah, a little cheesy with the way Palpatine died with his own Force lightning being reflected back at him, that last scene where all of the voices came through and I'm listening to Kanan and Ahsoka and I'm listening to all these different Jedi, like, I don't know. It just that really hit me in the theater, and I was like, "Wow, this is so awesome!" And like, it's finally like no more Sith killing Sith. This is like, oh, it just hit me in in a cool way. And there were plenty of issues with it, but I liked it way more than the bottom. That's my response.
Yeah,
I think that's really fair. I think the only thing I'd say in response to that is that I think if we'd gotten that movie on its own, or that movie after all the stuff that we've been getting recently, I probably would have liked it a lot more.
That's fair.
It's that for me, the first 2 movies, and granted mostly The Last Jedi, but I think even The Phantom Menace had started asking the question, what happens to the Force when the Sith are gone? What happens to the Force when the Jedi have mostly died out and maybe even we're critiquing the Jedi and looking at new things? And we introduced this really interesting question of, yeah, what does it mean for Kylo to not be Sith but still be in the dark side? Mm-hmm. And exploring that. And then to go back to just like, oh, JK, it was still actually the Sith all along. I was like, well, then why give us the first 2 movies? Like, anyway, and we'll get to more of that, I think, when we look at the individual movies. But I think that's good. Because I totally hear what you're saying. I think divorced from the other 2 movies in the trilogy, yeah, having Palpatine come back, like, sure, that's fine. It just felt like it made no... It was so disconnected from The Last Jedi.
Like, if they had built up to it more in the preceding movies, I mean, that's a failure of the fact that they had JJ... Then they brought in Ryan, and they brought JJ back. Like, yeah. I get, like, it would have made more sense if they had built up to it. But I think that, and I'd be curious when you both rewatch it now that you've seen everything that's come out since then, if you have a different opinion, because I feel like it holds up more in classic Star Wars fashion. It holds up better the more we backfill it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, the Clone Wars make me like the prequels a lot more. So it's entirely possible this other stuff will too. What's your 11?
It's Solo. I'll keep my explanation brief because I went on a little Rise of Skywalker tangent, but I just felt like as a standalone movie, Solo is an incredible space Western film. Good acting, fun story, good movie. But in the Star Wars universe, it just, I mean, you're never going to ever top Harrison Ford as Han Solo. I felt like it was just like I love the introduction of Kira. I love the fact we got a Maul cameo. And I really love Donald Glover as Lando. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. It just didn't feel like it fit well to me in the whole Star Wars universe. It didn't add a terrible amount for me. And it kind of feels like if it didn't exist, I wouldn't really notice. Like, I just don't think it adds a ton to me. And like, it's not a badly made movie, but if I'm talking about my best Star Wars movies, I just don't think like it stacks up to the others. It's also a little disjointed. I mean, that's just a case of like they filmed the whole thing and then basically scrapped the whole thing and changed a whole bunch of things and kind of pieced it all together. So I think that all that being said, like, not a bad movie, but just not a great Star Wars movie, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in real quick because Solo's my number 10. So this works well for me for basically all the same reasons. Like, it's a fun space western. It's a cool little story. But to me, it's not Han Solo's story. Because the arc that he has in this movie, the arc kind of fall redemption of most main characters, kind of follows very similarly to his arc throughout the original trilogy. So it's like, why are we doing it again? I don't know. I agree with you. Super fun movie. I enjoyed it. I saw it several times in theaters, but yeah, it doesn't really connect to the Star Wars story as a whole as I wanted it to.
And Solo's my number 10 for pretty much the same reasons. And I'd say it is in my second tier, though. To me, it's much better than those other two movies I discussed. I think mostly the same reasons whereas I feel like Rise of Skywalker is like actively like harmful to the Star Wars story. Solo to me is like, it's fine. Like if you make it a random adventure about a guy named Bon Bolo, then I think it's great. Like, it's a great part of Star Wars, and it helps me to understand why there is no sentient being in the galaxy, whether like, human, Twi'lek, Hutt, droid, natural living that can resist the seductive charm of Lando Calrissian. Like, that movie establishes that very well. And I've never seen a cape used quite so much as a seductive weapon. Billy D. Williams walked so that, I want to say Childish Gambino. I know that's not his actual name. Donald Glover, thank you. Could run, dance, swish, sashay, seduce everything.
That's why you have the young people, Matthew. We're here for you.
There you go. You got to help me with the terms. Help me with the names. But I got Childish Gambino. I mean, come on, give me that.
Yeah.
So, like, Rise of Skywalker, like, I probably don't ever want to watch again until I have to for reviewing it. Solo, to me, is a really fun movie if I watch it, if I just don't think it's actually in any way related to a character that was later played by Harrison Ford.
Yeah. Does that bring us to Alex's number 10?
Yeah, what's your number 10?
Number 10.
What was Solo was your number 10.
Yeah, Attack of the Clones was my number 11, Solo was my number 10.
Okay, yeah, so we're all in agreement there. Cool.
We all have Solo as number 10.
What's your number 9?
My number 9, again, it hurts me as a child of the prequels to do this, but it would be The Phantom Menace. I really enjoy actually watching the movie, but if I'm stacking it up against the other movies, it just doesn't rise to the same level. I think that it gets more consideration than the other two movies below it because it was the first crack at Lucas reviving the franchise after 20 years, or 15 years. And I think that, like, Darth Maul, especially when they hashed him out in the Clone Wars, became one of the most compelling villains in Star Wars. But even just in that movie by itself, like, just this menacing, cool-looking guy, the dual-bladed lightsaber, and the entire Duel of the Fates was just one of the best lightsaber duels to exist. Also, we got to meet love of my life, Ewan McGregor, on screen. Yes. I also think that Qui-Gon Jinn is an incredible Jedi, and Liam Neeson played him perfectly. And while those are all great pluses, there's a lot of drawbacks. The CGI just wasn't ready for that movie, and Lucas leaned way too much into CGI. I think that people have said that Star Wars has some racist stereotypes. If you're going to point to a movie, Phantom Menace is the movie to point to. Whether it's the possible Jewish stereotype of Watto, the Jamaican stereotype of Jar Jar, the Asian stereotype of the Trade Federation. I mean, the list goes on. There's problematic things in that movie that I think have to be mentioned and discussed, but I think that also is a huge knock against it. But its redeeming quality for me is the pod racing, which was just like a core memory of me as a child. Like, I know that for Matthew, like the trench run is like, was his childhood or their childhood, like just, their childhood moment of just pure elation. And as a child watching the pod racing, I was like, this is mine. This is like, it was like, I understand the stakes weren't as high, but like, it was fun. It was fast paced. It was like, I remember playing the video game. There was Pepsi machines with Anakin's pod racing face on it. Like, it was just like a little cultural moment. And to this day is still like something I look on with great nostalgia. So I think just for nostalgia purposes alone, it gets a little bump over Solo and Attack of the Clones. But for the racism, poor CGI, and general poor storytelling, and the fact that they used a just destroyed Yoda puppet that looked like he was on actual ketamine for the last 15 years, I think it has to be knocked down to my 9 spot.
Fair. All right, so just kind of review. So my bottom 3 are Solo at 9, Attack of the Clones at 10, Rise of Skywalker at 11. Alex, you have Phantom Menace at 9,
Yep.
Solo at 10, and Attack of the Clones at 11.
Yep.
And Erin, you had
Solo at 10 and Rise of Skywalker at 11.
Okay, so 9? What's your 9?
So my 9 is Attack of the Clones. We already chatted about this, For me, there's a lot of nostalgia. Camino, so fun. For me, okay, I grew up playing the Lego Star Wars, game, the one that has the prequels and the originals, and just, oh my... the pieces in that game are so fun. Like the Droid Factory, not a great scene. The Droid Factory in the game, one of my favorite things. That just made this movie so much better for me, being able to play it. And same thing with the pod racing. That is the hardest level in the Lego Star Wars game, if you ask me. I've played it so many times and failed. And just the same thing Alex is saying, how it's... Oh, no, that's from Phantom Menace. Okay, so I'll leave the pod racing for now. But, anyways, Attack of the Clones is...
Wow. Matthew, can you leave that in, please? I need Erin to be exposed to the people.
Don't make me turn this podcast around.
I'm
Stop
sorry.
fighting.
I'll get there eventually. But yeah, Attack of the Clones is just fun to me. The clones are my sexual awakening, to be honest with you. I love the clones in so many different ways. And just the fact that that movie brought the clones to existence, I just love it. I love it. So nice. Even though it's my number 9, it's a movie I have a lot of love for, but I do also recognize a lot of its drawbacks.
And that's awesome. That's all. I think one thing that's really important about this podcast is that all 3 of us fundamentally love Star Wars. And to me, there's a very big difference between being look, I love all this stuff. Here's my concerns about some parts of it. Versus oh my God, Star Wars is terrible. Here's why it's terrible. So yeah, we've got stuff we don't like. We got a lot of stuff we love, and I'm glad we're already kind of starting to talk about that. So I think with those 9, my number 8 still solidly in the middle category, but for a lot of the reasons I think that Alex brought up, is also Phantom Menace. And Phantom Menace, the first thing I will say is I think a lot of people of my generation, our expectations of it were very, very high, and while I think that it failed, I think some of that was fair. I think some of it, there was no way any movie was ever going to beat those expectations, because we'd all been the ones who'd grown up on the original trilogy. We've been reading the extended universe books, or we'd been playing with the toys, or we'd been playing some of the basic video games, and we thought for a good 12 years or so that we were never going to get Star Wars ever again on screen. And then we found out we were going to get it on screen, and we were so excited. And I think that was the biggest thing most of me and my friends talked about for that year. And that was the year I graduated college. I did go to a class every now and then. I did try to write a paper every now and then, and I played some rugby, but mostly I just talked about this movie coming out. And I don't know if I can explain the profound disappointment that a lot of us felt. And I think that was probably unfair to put all of that on that one movie, and that so much of the, I think, very unfortunate and very toxic hate that happened, I think, is completely inappropriate and completely wrong. And I to be clear, I never was writing a letter to Jake Lloyd or any of that nonsense, but obviously so many people were, and that's horrible. But I probably was, one of the people who was to other people, oh my God, that was so dumb, it was so horrible. And I think rewatching it, talking to people who loved it, as you guys have said, to me, the pod race just feels like a waste of time, but it does help me remember, was a lot of things about the original Trench Run, like before it was remastered, that were really bad. Like the TIE fighters were kind of jerking all over the place, and they had like one model of an X-Wing that broke apart in the exact same way, and every explosion was like that. So I think it's very easy for me to be like, yeah, I didn't love the pod race, but I get why people loved it. I think I have come to appreciate Phantom Menace a lot more than I did before, and that's why it's very much in my second tier, not my first, not my bottom one.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
When you watched it in theaters, if you remember, when Maul ignited his second lightsaber, did you think that was epic and exciting? Did you like the lightsaber fight at the time, or did you think, what the fuck am I watching right now?
I think that was one of the first moments where I thought advertising is killing movies. Because if I had seen that scene for the first time in the theater, I would have like thought this was the greatest moment in cinematic history. Mm-hmm. But I'd seen it 100 times.
Oh.
Because every trailer, every advertisement, every 5-second clip that was shown on the news in a story talking about it always showed that scene.
That's
I think
depressing.
like if you just had changed that one bit of marketing, I think it would have been amazing. But instead, we'd seen it so many times. It was like, okay, yeah, he's got a double-bladed lightsaber. I know the exact specifications of the double-bladed lightsaber because 5 different magazines have written about it. And
that's rough.
Yeah.
That sucks.
So yeah, and I also just it took me a while to buy Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan. Again, I think just because I loved Alec Guinness so much and I've grown up with Alec Guinness, I've come to think he's a fantastic Ewan McGregor's a fantastic Obi-Wan. So yeah, so I think that's for all, and we'll go into much more of that when we talk about the movie itself. I think the point of all this being, I think it is a decent movie. I think that they made some choices that I fundamentally disagree with, primarily the idea to say, let's explore some of the more complex and more adult themes in terms of subtle corruption and financial and political dealings and the slow fall to the dark side in a movie that we're also going to specifically skew younger than anything that's been made before was just makes no sense. And I think Jake Lloyd was a perfectly nice person who probably was dealing with bad direction and bad writing. And so he personally deserves none of the attacks he gets, but it was just like a nails on chalkboard performance. Like nothing.
Neither did Ahmad Best, to be fair. I mean, both of them got just so much hate after that movie. Ahmad Best played Jar Jar Binks, for those who don't know.
Yeah. And I'm glad Ahmad Best has come back and stuff like that. My point just being like, I'm not blaming Jake Lloyd for this, but there was nothing about that child that A, I wanted to ever pay attention to, or B, in any way made me think this is going to be Anakin. And I thought well, we'll get more into it when we review the movie, but yeah, that's all the reason why.
One quick point, and we will get more in depth when we review the movie, but I actually think that to me, that is one of the strengths of it, is that you would never expect this little, nobody, awkward slave boy to turn into one of the most evil and confused beings to ever exist. And I'm excited to talk about that when we hash out the movie in a couple weeks.
Okay. For me, it's not that I don't believe that he's evil. It's that I don't believe that he's competent. Like the whole how he blows up the Trade Federation ship was just so obnoxious. But anyway, we'll get into that. Let's
like the way Luke blew up the
Death Star. Anyways, moving on.
If you can see Matthew's face right now, y'all. Let's move on.
Wow, this
Erin,
is pod racing.
What's your number 8?
My number. Oh, this is pod racing. Okay, my number 8. Yeah, I'm gonna get a little hate from this. But it's The Last Jedi. It's just a movie that I've seen once. I enjoyed it, but I missed a lot. Like hearing Matthew talk about it and how it's one of their favorite movies and like all the stuff that you gathered from the movie, I didn't. Like I missed a lot of it. I was confused when Yoda blew up those books. I was like, what? So I'm, again, with Rise of Skywalker, I'm really excited to rewatch and like actually comprehend. Because the sequels came out during a time in my life where I loved Star Wars. I had always loved Star Wars, but it wasn't my primary focus. Like, I was really deep into The Lord of the Rings at the time. Also, great fandom. But Yeah, so I guess I just wasn't I wasn't paying as close of attention as I would if I watch a Star Wars movie now. So I'm excited to rewatch. There was a couple things that just felt like abandoned from The Force Awakens, and that theme just continues throughout the sequel trilogy, unfortunately. But yeah, I'm excited to rewatch and re-understand, because a lot of that movie went over my head, and I've just never fully understood it.
Mm-hmm.
So
that makes sense.
That's why it's at my number 8 right now, and I anticipate it moving up in the ranks after we review it.
No, I think it's all totally fair. I think it's a very... It took me a couple of viewings, I think. I loved it the first time, but it took me a couple of times to really like fully grasp it. I think it's a much more complicated and nuanced movie than I think a lot of the others are. Alex, what's your number? Or if you have thoughts of that, or what's your number 8?
Well, so if I may, my number 8 was Rise of Skywalker, and I already gave some in-depth thoughts on that. So I'll just say that I want to respond to Erin. I'll just say that Last Jedi is my number 7. So to respond to Erin on that, I want to note also to our listeners here that I kind of like Matthew does, I kind of have tiers, and I think that The Last Jedi is the first one in my every movie, this one and above, is like razor thin margins for me. Like, I love The Last Jedi. I love that movie so much, but it's just when I was comparing every little aspect, it just wasn't it just wasn't surpassing, but it's like 0.1% differences here. But I think that The Last Jedi, when I watched it in theaters, my initial reaction was, this might be the greatest Star Wars film ever made, like ever. And then I thought about it more, and I'm like, but actually, I don't know. Because then I started thinking about different like little issues I had with it. But then every time I watched it, I'm like, this is amazing. But then I'm also like, oh, but there's also these little, and it's such a like polarizing movie, not just for me. I know for the fan base as a whole. I mean, looked at the critical reviews at the time that has like the best critical reviews of a Star Wars movie and like some of the worst fan reviews. I think that it does, it suffers from the fact that Disney couldn't get their shit together long enough to get like a cohesive storyline written down for the sequels, which you would think they would have learned from Lucas's, storytelling, but whatever. I think that finally getting Luke Skywalker back after not seeing him, like, I know he showed up at the last second of Force Awakens, but seeing him actually in a movie for the first time since Return of the Jedi was just, it's so special and so magical. And I think that, actually like getting to see Rey train, seeing Luke's take, and like actual like looking with a critical lens at the flaws of the Jedi, and like they're not these just perfect beings. They're not always right. Here is how the Force actually works. This is how balance goes down. And like, I think that for me, that movie was both a really fun adventure, but what I really, really loved about it is a lot of people complained about how Luke dies. They're like, well, he used this crazy new ability to force project himself. He doesn't even fight anyone with a lightsaber. And while I am sad, and that is a knock against it, there's no actual lightsaber duel in this movie, the only one out of the actual episodes. I think that Luke's death is like the most perfect Jedi death. Luke found a way to save everyone he loves and cares about, stop his nephew without actually resorting to violence in any way. He was able to project his own being. And I think that to me kind of like really summed up the movie of like, we're going away from the classic stereotypes of Star Wars. And we'll get more into it when we discuss it, but I think that gave me a lot of points. Very quickly, the negatives for me were just, I thought the Canto Bight could have been so much better. I thought their entire like little escapade, it didn't to me have a true bearing on what ended up happening. Like the rebels still got found, still got shot at. Like none of that it actually ended up killing more people than saving them in the end, I think. Mm-hmm. And sure, we learned a lot about like the inner workings of the War Machine, but I don't know. It's just a lot of things didn't land for me. There were some hokey things, and I think the fact that it doesn't stay consistent throughout the sequels, and this being like the middle child of the sequels, it just knocked down a few points for me. But as you can see, I said a lot of positive things. I do love the movie. It just doesn't rise above.
Yeah. I think all that's fair. I think Last Jedi is much higher for me, but and I think in part because to me, like that whole thing you talk about, like failure is the point of the movie, and I think what I love about it is how much it subverted all the expectations like that. But I think it also is, it's therefore it's weird, it's a like, you go to your favorite restaurant and they're like, you're used to getting this one particular flavor palette. They're like, oh yeah, hey, today we're giving you something pretty different, and it feels that, and I think that's we'll get to that, I think, when I talk about it. But I think it's completely legit to have Paul, my former co-host, who will be on as a guest from time to time, really helped, I think, me to get this, is that because there was so much toxicity in so much of the attacks on Last Jedi, and I think, you mentioned the low score on Rotten Tomatoes and stuff like that, there was a lot of bots that had a lot to do with that, and a lot of review bombing. But I think it codified the lines where it also became now like, if you don't Last Jedi, you're sexist and you hate Rey, or this kind of nonsense. And so it's really important that, like, we can talk about, like, yeah, you can be an awesome Star Wars fan and Last Jedi just not be your favorite thing in the world, and that's totally okay. It is mine, and I'll talk more about why it is later. But but on that subject, and I think I want to be clear, this is very much in my middle tier. It's getting towards the top of my middle tier, but it's not in my top tier, is Revenge of the Sith. And Alex, I know it's your absolute favorite, and I'm really looking forward. I think I've learned a lot already just by hearing you talk about it more. And just, I think Revenge of the Sith is the movie, I would have had it at my absolute bottom probably 2 years ago. But really watching Attack of the Clones and then talking about Attack of the Clones, particularly with people who had more grown up with these movies, talking about people who'd grown up with the prequels about them, really kind of helped me see a lot of the things that
You mean the Clone Wars?
I meant the prequels and the TV shows, but
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
I probably I got 3 hours sleep after a 10-day road trip last night, so but also
So
I'm
valid.
old. My names are going to mix up a lot. Point being, like, it is, I think I have come to really understand why it really works for a lot of people, and I honor that, and I love that. It just not for me. I never really bought Hayden Christensen as Anakin, and especially after seeing Matt Latner on the Clone Wars, even more so, his performance just felt bad. I think that's very much more bad direction. I think Hayden Christensen's a perfectly fine actor. Order 66 just felt silly to me. His fall scene felt ridiculous to me. And again, this is just 2 years ago. I would have said, like, I think it's a bad movie, and I don't understand people who love it. I totally get it. I think it is just, after the huge disappointment of the other two, the bar was set where it was. Having grown up with Darth Vader and thus having incredibly high expectations of what Anakin would be like, I'm not saying I think that it is like a bad movie. I just think for myself, it just never really worked.
Yeah.
So that's my number 7.
It's your number 7. Alex, what's your number 7?
I said it was The Last Jedi. Wait, what was that? Your number 8, Matthew, or your number 7?
No, that was my number 7.
Okay. Yeah, number 7 was The Last Jedi for me. I kind of just jumped the gun because
Yep.
of where I
I
was
brought
talking
it up.
about it.
Yep.
So my number 6 is The Force Awakens.
Wait,
Well,
I have a number 7.
Let's
I'm
stick to
confused.
yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Yep.
No, you're okay. I am also confused.
The Last Jedi was my number 7. Erin, what's your number 7?
Yeah, my number 7 is Return of the Jedi. I'm sorry.
That's fine.
I don't know. It's just, I haven't seen it in a while. I enjoyed it. It's a good film, but the other two originals mean more to me, I guess I'll say.
Mm-hmm.
Like, A New Hope is just the culmination of Star Wars. It is the beginning. It's just an incredible film. And, I mean, The Empire Strikes Back is a beautiful story start to finish. It's the perfect middle. Like, they really nailed the sequel, and that's so rare, I feel like, to actually really nail the second of a trilogy. And yeah, Return of the Jedi, great conclusion, great movie. But, like, sitting here and thinking about it now, there's not a ton that sticks out to me. So I am excited to watch it again and really pay attention and see how that fills in my complete view of the original trilogy. Okay, now we're ready. Are you?
Well, I'm not going to respond. Alex completely having no response to my comments from Revenge of the Sith was interesting, but I'll make a comment about Jedi. I think that's all totally legit. I think it is much higher for me, probably because it's literally the first movie I can remember seeing in theaters. And I have such a visceral response to that. And I was 8, and I just absolutely loved every part of it. And I was very much the target audience for it. And so, yeah, I think if you're curious to rewatch it again and go over it all with y'all. All right, so we've all done our 7 and down. Alex, what's your number 6?
Yeah, my number 6 is The Force Awakens. For me, The Force Awakens, I thought was a kind of a revelation. So for me, growing up, I was born in 1997. And so, I was 2 when Phantom Menace came out, and I was only like 9 or 8 when Revenge of the Sith came out. And so I couldn't see any of the Star Wars movies, like, premieres in theaters. I didn't see any of them in theaters. My mom thought I was too young to see Revenge of the Sith when it came out. I just watched them on DVD, and I thought that, by the time I was like, 8 years old, I was like, well, that's it. Star Wars is over. I'm 8 years old. I will never get into a Star Wars movie again. That is so depressing. And then flash forward, 2015, and I'm getting a Star Wars movie again. Like, I get to go to a premiere. I get to dress up in my Obi-Wan robes. I get to go with all the other Star Wars fans, all cosplaying, into a movie theater and just watch something completely new with new characters, with old characters, and just transcend. And it was The Force Awakens also came out like in a kind of a difficult moment in my life. The trailer for the movie was released about a week after my dad passed away, and it was like the one thing that like kind of helped, one of the few things that like kind of helped me get through that period. And I could lean into that. I watched that trailer like twice a day, every day, and like just tried to like use that as a way to kind of escape my depression at the time. And when the movie finally got there, my expectations were so high. I was there's no way they could ever meet them. And in that moment, they did. They were blown away. I was like, this is everything I could have wanted in a Star Wars movie. I remember leaving the theater and recording a video of myself, which I would not show you, Erin and Matthew, because it's too embarrassing. But I physically couldn't walk. My legs felt numb. I was out of breath. I had to take 20 minutes in my car with my friend before I felt comfortable driving again because I was so blown away. Then when the buildup of 15 years finally passed away, or not 10 years passed away. I look at it in a more critical way. It is very close to being a carbon copy, like plot-wise, of A New Hope, which is why it is lower on the list. Still, like a very, very excellent movie. I think that Kylo Ren is an incredible character. I think Rey is an incredible character. I think that in that movie, Finn had like endless potential that Disney did squander. But, all the main characters I thought were just blowing it out of the water. There was mystery. There was intrigue. Getting Han and Chewie back and Leia back on screen, and even just seeing a glimpse of Luke, all of it just felt so magical, but it also felt very predictable to a degree. So I think the predictability of it, the fact that I just think the other movies, like having come before, being more original, makes them higher. But it's still like an incredible film. That's why it's very middle of my list, I think. Emotional versus kind of logical brain there, I guess. But Matthew, what's your number 6? Or let's respond to that.
Well, both, because my number 6 is also The Force Awakens.
Oh, great.
And I first of all, I hadn't realized we had such similar connections. My mother passed away right around the time that the trailers first came out, and so that was a big. And I had a lot of other things going through my wrong in my life at the time. I had probably the worst year of my life, and that movie was really a big part of what sustained me, the hope of it. And I thought a lot about where to rank it, because I feel like I agree with all the critiques you've just had. I also think it had an incredible power on me. The metaphor that comes to me, and there's going to be a little bit of digression, but I hope it's going to make sense. My mother was a huge foodie. And so once I was an adult, my sister was an adult, like when we were all in the same place, for her birthday, we would kind of pool our money and take her to a very nice restaurant, the kind that would do like a really nice, like 5-course meal kind of a thing. We were not, super rich. We couldn't do this more than once or twice a year, maybe, but it was a big expense, but it was worth it. And one thing I remember in those meals is that you almost always get like a palate cleanser of some kind between 2 courses that were going to be pretty different. And sometimes it was an actual course that was meant to do that. Sometimes it was a little just like amuse-bouche or something. And I couldn't tell you much about any of them. And I never certainly went home thinking, oh, that palate cleanser, that was the best part of the meal. But as I come to understand more about food, I understand the love that I have of whatever came after that palate cleanser would have been completely impossible without the palate cleanser.
Yeah.
And that's what The Force Awakens was for me. Because I think, and to take the metaphor a little bit too far, and I promise I'll stop with it now, but like at my generation, at my experience, the prequels had left really bad taste in our mouths. And not only in terms of our own enjoyment, but I think it just became, I think unfortunately the media cycles that can build just made this worse, and the fandoms made it worse. And I was probably a part of that. But it became like Star Wars stopped being cool. Like it had been kind of cool when I was a kid, I think, for about, yeah, actually, no, it was pretty damn cool when we were kids. And then it just stopped being cool. And I was like, oh, you're a Star Wars fan? Ha ha ha. You must love Jar Jar Binks. Like, spent most of my 20s with Star Wars fandom being like this ridiculous thing that, you know, some people were reading the extended novels and were really into that. But the rest of it was like, yeah, we were just getting teased about it all the time. And like, how could you still like that? And I internalized a lot of that. I was like, I love Star Wars, but then the prequels ruined it for me. And so I didn't watch like, you know, the other stuff that was coming out. I never even bothered with it, with the Clone Wars, any of that stuff. I didn't read most of the EU. I was kind of done. And The Force Awakens, I think I have all the same concerns about or complaints that you just talked about. The fact that it repeats so much of the plot, the fact that and I think this is one of the things that then hurts the later two sequels, is that, you know, we'd had a story of the plucky rebellion fighting the Empire. What I really wanted now was the story of what happens when you're in power now. And we'd had the story of how the good guys fall. I now wanted the story of what happens when you try to reassert power and you have to not become a dictatorship yourself, but also you have to worry about all these things that are fighting against you. And how do you, and I think The Mandalorian and some of those shows are starting to really give us that. I wanted all that. Mm-hmm. But I saw The Force Awakens in theater. The first time I saw it was, I think, a 12 o'clock, like a 12 p.m. showing. I think the second time I saw it was a 3:30 showing that day. And the third time I saw it was an 8 p.m. showing that day. Like, I just stayed in the theater and watched it 3 times. And it also gave us, I mean, like, I think having a woman Jedi is such an incredibly important thing that Star Wars needed. Having a black Jedi is such an important thing that Star Wars needed. And the fact that we never quite got that with Finn makes it like a lot harder. But having Poe, you know, I mean, the representation is important there with all 3 of them, but there's also so much more to their characters. There's so many things that I think that movie added to Star Wars and did things that Star Wars needed. That, like, you know, I kind of feel like it's somewhat unfair that it's not higher ranked, but that's why it's not higher ranked, is that I think it had to do something really hard in the same way Phantom Menace did, but where Phantom Menace tried all these new things that I think really didn't work for what it had to be. I think Force Awakens was exactly the movie it had to be at the time it had to be, which means that it's not my favorite, but I'm incredibly grateful that it exists.
It's a good take. I also agree with the whole, like, I internalized a lot of my Star Wars fandom when I was a little bit younger, and then this trailer came out and this movie started coming out, and I was like, oh, I'm flaunting this all over the place now. It's back in the world view. We are so back, y'all. And and I just was like full send into the open nerdom to the point where, like, it's just part of my brand now. It's great.
Yep. I love that.
Erin?
I love it. For me, my number 6 is The Phantom Menace. Mm-hmm. It's a lot higher than you guys both put it. High. It's so high, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. To me, it's all nostalgia. I already kind of talked on the pod race, but that moment was just so amazing for me. Like, the Tusken shooting at them, just like the going over and over, the same, like, chorus, and it was just all fun to me. It was all fun. Duel of the Fates, chef's kiss, literally incredible. Darth Maul, incredible. Qui-Gon Jinn, the best. Like, he is, to this day, one of the best Jedi, like one of the most true Jedi in his kind of gray Jedi form. And I just really love what he brought to the table of, like, oh yeah, here's this Jedi Council. They're not all that. Like, he's going to listen, he's going to play their games, but he's going to do what he wants to do at the same time.
Right.
And I just really love his character. That being said, yeah, a lot of racism. It's bad.
Yeah.
It's bad. And I don't condone any of that. And it's all so horrible. For the nostalgia, this is still pretty high for me. But as far as being a good movie, like you guys both said, the CGI, not great. too heavily leaned upon. And the racist stereotypes, like, why?
Yeah.
Why, George? Why? Like, you made it through the originals and it did so well with, like, little to no racial stereotypes. Why? But yeah, I also just loved seeing, because in the original trilogy, Luke and Leia are about 19. And they're kind of like the youngest heroes. But being a kid and having like little Anakin, like he is also a kid with no perspective of the world or ability to have a normal conversation. Like he's an awkward kid. I was homeschooled, so I always felt like I was on the outside. I always felt awkward and just a little misplaced in the world. And I kind of related to him. He was just kind of on his own, like he had some friends, but, you know, sometimes they like teased him and stuff and they didn't always support him. So, yeah, I just liked a story of like the little guy that could, even if it's not beautifully told and it's a little hard to believe that he blew up the Trade Federation ship. Like, it was still something really cool for me as a kid. So that's kind of why it is so high. And then, if I may, just go straight into my number 5 because it's The Force Awakens, which you guys just both talked about. Yeah. Sorry, guys. Anyways, my number 5 is The Force Awakens. For all the reasons you guys said, it is A New Hope Part 2, but A New Hope was a great movie. You know, like there's nothing wrong with that. Like it's a bomb movie, and so is The Force Awakens. And again, like having the main character be a woman, like a female Jedi, was huge. Super exciting. Seeing the Millennium Falcon again. No, we're not taking that piece of junk. All the other ships get blown up.
Yeah.
The junk it is. Like, just the best. Just amazing. It's fun getting Han back, Chewie back. I wish Han would have lived longer.
Harrison got his wish. That man wanted to be killed off from day one.
True, yeah.
He literally like wanted to be killed off in every movie, and George kept saying, no.
Yeah.
No.
And I will say, when we get to the review of that movie, I'm excited because I have some real questions about how exactly Han dies. But we'll get to that when we get to that.
Also, the fact that he died and they still roped him into doing a scene in Rise of Skywalker is incredible to me.
Yeah, to me, that is 100% Harrison Ford's respect for Carrie Fisher. Because I think that, I should have said before, I do think that last movie would have been much better. I think they had written that movie with Carrie Fisher in mind, and then had to kind of make a lot of changes, and that's a whole other thing. But we'll get to that when we talk about the movie itself.
I just want to your point, because I'm pretty sure they wrote each of the sequels to have one of the original 3 actors being the big focus.
Highlighted.
It was Han, then it was Luke, and it was supposed to be Leia, but
yeah, tragedy there. Yeah, no, I think Erin, those thoughts on both Phantom Menace and Force Awakens make total sense. I think like I can appreciate how important I loved having a woman Jedi on screen, and I can appreciate how important it is, but also I had always seen myself as a Jedi on screen, and I'm like, I can sympathize but empathize with how much it would mean to see yourself on screen in that kind of a way. And I'm really glad that you can talk about that. What's your number 5, Alex?
We're coveted top 5. We're entering original trilogy territory for me. A New Hope comes in at my number 5 spot. It has to be given. I don't think that A New Hope for me can be ranked any lower than 5 just because it started it all. It was the first one. This is what it was, just birthed out of Lucas's head. There was no material to go off of. And it changed a generation. It really revolutionized everything from the sci-fi genre to technology and how you film movies, to story, to everything. It really revolutionized so many things. And I think that, when they made it, they weren't sure if they were going to get another one. Yep. And so it really was just, a very complete movie, start to finish. I mean, there was literally an ending. Like, if that was the only Star Wars movie ever made, it would have made sense just as it was self-contained. I think that, the acting between Alec Guinness and Harrison Ford, Carrie Fisher, Mark Hamill got better in the next movie, but we're all just, really, really great. And, I do, I don't have the same connection that you do, Matthew, to the Trench Run, but the Trench Run is just a beautiful, really just awesome scene. I think that where it falters for me is there's just, and again, it was 1977, but there's just some kind of quirky moments. I mean, like, we discussed them at length when we talk about the movie, but there's just quite a few like little just like, how does that make sense? Why is that happening? Like, and I recognize that Lucas...
I was the first one on our review of it to be like, yeah, they should have just flown directly at the exhaust port. Like, it makes no sense whatsoever.
Yeah, there's a lot. Like, there's a lot. And, like, Vader just being knocked and spinning into space. And there's just a lot going on there. But, I mean, it also gives us one of our best villains in Grand Moff Tarkin. I wish that we had gotten more screen time of him. And I think that there's so much positive going for it. I think that, again, for me, it's not so much like there are some kind of quirky, hokey things to go on, but it's not so much the negatives that drop to number 5 for me. It's just that the other movies, I think, just do it slightly better, or I have a slightly deeper connection to them. But I think A New Hope is just, obviously an incredible all-in-all film. Just doesn't have the same nostalgia factor that it probably does for Matthew. And when I look at the originals, it just ranks at the bottom of the 3 of them for me.
That's fair. Well, and for me, for my number 5, we're now going to start to get in the original trilogy as well. And I will say that the way I kind of did my rankings, the best way I can think about them is like, if I'm at a party or I'm at a bar or something and like the movie is on in the background, the bottom tier, which for me is Attack of the Clones, Rise of Skywalker, those are where like I'm probably going to walk away from the TV because I just don't want to be around it. The middle tier is, yeah, I'll probably pay attention to the movie if nothing else is going on, but if there's like an interesting conversation or people want to play a game, like I'll walk away from the movie. And that's, Force Awakens, Revenge of the Sith, Phantom Menace, Solo. My top 5 are, I'm probably going to just check out of the party and just watch this movie, and they're all like, if the bottom tier for me is like 2s and 3s and the middle is like from like 4 to 7 or 8, the top is all like 9.995 up to 9.999. Like, they're all that close for me. So understand, I'm recognizing I still think number 5 is one of the best movies ever made, but my number 5 is Empire Strikes Back. And I think it just, we've done a whole review of it that I think will come out after this, but you'll hear me talk more about it. I don't think it's a bad movie in any way. I think it's phenomenal. I think it does so much to get us from point A to point C, from the beginning to the end, but it's the middle part. And to me, the Force and the struggles over the Force are so much of what I love. And I think like this movie really sets a lot of them up, but they really come to fruition in Jedi and are started in A New Hope. So to me, there's no critique I can make of this movie by any means. It's just that the others hit a little bit harder for me. But yeah, that's the only reason why Empire's my number 5. Erin, what's your number 4?
My number 4 is A New Hope.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the best. It's just the best. It holds up. Like, watching it now, people are like, oh, it's so old, it's cheesy. Like, my dad says a lot, like, yeah, I understand, like, the originals are pretty, like, cheesy, like, they're pretty old. You may not, like, appreciate them as much. He says the same thing for basically any movie made before 1990. But just watching it back, I was like, no, this is a great film. Like, start to finish, I'm interested. And the character beats are so good and the acting is so nuanced, but there, like, we talk about this a little bit when we dissect it more, but like, Luke and Leia tend to have kind of subdued reactions compared to what we in today's media would consider like a normal reaction. But it's still meaningful and it still hits. And that's just something that was done so well. And the same reason both you said, it's the start, it's the beginning. It's just a perfect story start to finish, except for, I will say, if that was the only film and Darth Vader ended by simply spinning into an abyss, I'd be kind of disappointed.
That's fair.
Also, I wouldn't know to be disappointed because I wouldn't know how awesome he could be, I guess. So that's kind of a silly bit of the movie to me, but other than that, it's just a great film. That's why it's my number 4.
I can hear Darth Vader going, "What?" in my head when Han comes up behind him.
What?
That's fair. That's fair. Alex, what's your number 4?
Yeah, Rogue One is my number 4. I really think that Rogue One is probably the best thing movie-wise that Disney's done. I think that like it in my opinion, it really encapsulates the vibe and the kind of the feelings and tones of the original trilogy. And like I feel like when I was watching it in the theater and every time I watch it now, I feel like I'm almost watching like an original movie. It does not rely heavily on CGI outside of the deep fake Grand Moff Tarkin, which is tough. But I mean, the rest of it is like very practical effects. And I think the CGI, when they use it, is done really well. I think that the story is really compelling. And I was like, wow, they made an entire movie just to fill a plot hole. That seems silly. And I was like, wait, no, this adds so much. It adds so much to like, it really explains why the Death Star is so easy to blow up, which has been like the largest plot hole in Star Wars for so long. And it makes it more meaningful and impactful. It really is our first look, I think, in a movie at like the day-to-day interactions of like actual rebels. Like there's no Jedi going around helping them. It's just these are rebels, boots on the ground, espionage. This is how most of the rebellion got shit done during that era. And I just, between the cinematography, I mean, Felicity Jones and what is his name?
Diego Luna.
Diego Luna.
Thank you, Diego Luna. Both are just treasures. I mean, obviously we didn't know at the time, but we got Andor out of that, which is one of the best Star Wars shows, and all the other supporting cast. I mean, you have this diverse cast that all portrays their roles and they're acting so well. But like, I have like interest in all of them. You bring Saw Gerrera into live action from the Clone Wars, which was so cool to me. And like, I don't know, it's just all of that. And then the thing that really pushed up the number 4 though was I've shared this story with these two before, but when the movie was kind of reaching its end, I was like, okay, they've escaped, whatever. Like, the plans are getting beamed up. The movie's about to end. And then they have the audacity to have Darth Vader come down that hallway. And for 60 seconds, nothing mattered. I don't care. I could have been dying. The world could have been ending outside. The zombie apocalypse could be starting. Nothing mattered. All that mattered was what I was watching on that screen, and it was one of the greatest things, maybe the greatest single minute of Star Wars I had ever seen. Just pure, like, peak Vader rage. Anakin was beaten, and he was mad about it. And you saw that rage in like, this is what I always pictured when I was watching the original, is that, like, the menace of Vader would be like, and I finally got to see it. And it was just, I remember squeezing so hard into my girlfriend at the time's leg that I accidentally left like a little bit of a bruise because I was just so excited. She was not upset at me. She was just like, I get it. Like, this was crazy for you. But I felt so bad about that. But I was just so lost. My whole world just tunneled into this. And so, I think that definitely brought up the number 4 for me. Matthew, what's your number 4?
Yeah, well, I'm going to talk about all the stuff about Rogue One in just a second. My number 4 is Return of the Jedi. It's, again, I think, just a phenomenal movie. Probably it's... basically, the way my top 5 are is the original trilogy and then Last Jedi and Rogue One. And you'll see how it all works out in a second, but I think of the original trilogy, A New Hope is my favorite for all the reasons that we discussed, and I'll kind of get into more. Return of the Jedi, I think I just like a little bit more than Empire Strikes Back. It's still phenomenal, though. I don't love the Jabba the Hutt stuff, but everything else I think is just amazing. I thought, I loved the Ewoks. I know that's kind of controversial. I think the Darth Vader, the Luke Vader battle at the end of Jedi is, I don't think is the best lightsaber scene by any means, but is hands down my favorite because it's the one that is the most meaning for me. That movie and A New Hope, I mean, all 3 of them, but that movie especially really helped shape a lot of my ethical understanding of the world for a long period of time, and then adjusted by what we'll get to in a minute. But yeah, I just think it's absolutely fantastic. I'll happily rewatch it 1,000 times. And I realized like I never really thought about it until we were doing these rankings the second time even. But my top 5, like I said, are the best. It's the original trilogy, and then I think it's the 2 that are the most non-Star, the most different from Star Wars. Because my number 3 is also Rogue One. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to echo all the things you said. I think the other thing though for me is that it gives us a picture into a part of the Star Wars universe that we've never seen, which is the people below the headlines. Like, what about the people who aren't really using the Force? Like, yes, the 2 guys who are most Chirrut. Yeah, thank you. Like the 2 of them who, by the way, canonical love story in my mind. Like, I don't think there's any way to doubt that. But like, they're using the Force a little bit, but they're definitely not Jedi. And it's this beautiful reminder of like, yeah, Luke's gonna blow up the Death Star. You know, Rey is gonna do these incredible things. Finn's gonna do these incredible things. But so much of a rebellion is never going to be remembered, is these beautiful acts of incredible heroism that no one's going to ever pay attention to. And I love all of that. It gives us our first introduction of the Mikkelsen brothers into Star Wars, with Mads playing Galen Erso in this incredible role, later to be followed by his brother Lars, who plays Grand Admiral Thrawn, both in voice acting and now on screen. Yeah, it gives us, I think, Cassian Andor, which leads to Andor, which I think is probably my favorite overall Star Wars property. At least I think is the best of all time. Yeah, it's just, there's so much that I love about Rogue One, and I think so much of it is that it just felt different from every other Star Wars thing I'd ever seen, and that blew me away so much.
Yeah. I have lots to say on Rogue One, but I'll get there.
Okay, what's your number 3 then?
My number 3 is The Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, legit.
Rewatching this movie was a thrill for me. Like, I just loved it. There was so much that I kind of hadn't fully remembered. But, like, the battle on Hoth, so fun. Like, every single takedown of those AT-ATs is exciting. Every single one is different.
Yep.
And it's this huge stakes that these rebels are up against, and they're just trying to escape in time. And I mean, we got the Wampa. Like, that's just such a great part of this universe to me. I feel like, well, I guess we did have some like monsters in A New Hope, but it's like, it's just so fun to get monsters. I just think it's fun. It's this abominable snowman type, and it really challenges Luke. And that's what kind of leads him to hear Obi-Wan. And it's something we talk about in the actual rewatch of this film, but I just loved that they took the tragedy of Mark Hamill's crash and injuries and were able to twist it into just a really fun plot point.
Yep.
And they made it work instead of trying to cover things up or all that stuff. And I liked it a lot. We get the love story of Han and Leia. It's something I've never fully understood or maybe bought into in the past because I just was young. So the nuanced acting kind of went over my head. And then anytime I watch it recently, I'm like, these 2 are so down bad for each other. Like, this angry flirting is out of control. Like, I can't even. And so for all those reasons, it's just a great film.
Yeah, we had a conversation about it that will get released next week, but I love that Erin, I think got you on your side that like when Leia kisses Luke, she has no interest in Luke.
No.
That is 100% just to like, hey Han, watch me kiss this other person move. Yeah. The angry flirting, as you said, and poor Luke gets caught in the middle.
Poor guy.
So what's your number 2, Erin?
Revenge of the Sith.
Fair?
Wait, I didn't say my number 3 yet.
Oh, sorry.
Alex.
Alex, what's your number 3?
I was just going to say Return of the Jedi is my number 3.
Okay.
But very briefly, I think it finishes the original trilogy in a really beautiful way. I love the stuff on Endor. I think the Jabba's palace brings it down a little bit from the other 2 I have above it. But it has one of the most emotional lightsaber fights in the entire series between Vader and Luke, and seeing Luke like finally turn away from the Emperor and getting to see the Emperor in all his glory in that movie. The whole thing was just, I think, really a beautiful film and just rises a little bit above the other ones for me. But, yeah.
That's really fair. That's really fair.
Erin, what's your number 2?
Yeah. It's still Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah.
Just to me, it's a great movie. It's the ending of a trilogy I loved so much and grew up with. Order 66, although it misses for Matthew, it hits for me. Like, those are all those Jedi that, I mean, this is also part of the marketing aspect of Star Wars, but since, you know, Attack of the Clones, we saw so many Jedi in the arena, and they just took each of those Jedi and kind of built their story out a little bit, you know? So there was comic books about Ayla and Luminara, Unduli, like we get to read about Plo Koon, like, and the Clone Wars obviously enhances this in later times also, but for me, like, I had played with those Jedi, like, they meant a lot to me, and the clones meant a lot to me, especially after watching the Clone Wars, and so Order 66 is hard.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've cried while watching it, because I haven't seen The Revenge of the Sith recently, because that movie hurts me so bad. I'll probably cry this time through. We'll see. But I love it. I mean, Anakin's fall to the dark side, the battle between him and Obi-Wan on Mustafar, such a great lightsaber battle, possibly one of the best, just because they are such raw, talented Jedi. You know, they are both so good at fighting, and it's just interesting to watch the two of them. And it's also such an emotional battle because they were brothers. Like, he really did raise Anakin, but also Anakin kind of raised him, you know? Like, they did so much for each other. And again, that's built out in the Clone Wars, but just to see the culmination of that. Padme's death, I've never loved. I've always been like, why did she just die, though?
It's a little 19th century English heroine, you know, dies of a broken heart.
Yeah, but at the same time, I get it. Like, with the understanding I have of those characters now, like, they were everything to each other. So it makes sense. Like, I can't imagine being in a situation where someone you love so much, someone who was your world, just committed genocide. Like, what do you do with that? You probably just lay down and die. Like, you don't know how to view the galaxy after that. Like, that would be so horrible. And this movie just brings up so many feelings and so many good and bad things. And yeah, it's just always an entertaining watch for me, even though I avoid it because of my poor heart.
That's fair. That's very fair. Yeah. Alex, what's your number two?
Empire Strikes Back would be my number two. I, especially from the recent rewatch, I think that it is the probably, like, objectively speaking, one of the best just movies ever made. It's really hard to even attempt to, you know, you make an original movie, A New Hope, and how are you going to top that? Like, sequels so often, so easily fall flat on their face.
Yep.
There's very few. I mean, like, Star Wars and The Godfather are the only two I can think of off the bat where the second movie is better than the first one. And it just blew it away. I mean, like, I also, like, in Star Wars, I mean, I really love it when we get to see some of the darker tones of the universe. And I think that's why I like Rise of Skywalker. That's why I like Revenge of the Sith. And that's why I like Empire Strikes Back. Because, you know, it does kind of end on this kind of, like, darker feeling to it all. But you get Hoth, like Erin said, just the whole Hoth battle is incredible. I love the nuanced acting between, you know, Han and Leia. I think that Mark Hamill's acting really took to a new level, and, like, I preach about this in our episode, but the fact that he spent weeks on set with just an R2 robot and Frank Oz under the floorboards talking to a puppet, like, it was able to do that while acting. And
I'm glad you're no longer committing droid erasure while discussing that scene, as you were in our episode that comes out next week.
Yes,
so.
you know, droid erasure is fine. I did mention R2 this time at least, but Yoda is one of my favorite characters in Star Wars. Being introduced to him, seeing an aspect of Luke's training, you know, the first time we actually see Luke fight with a lightsaber, just the biggest reveal, one of the biggest reveals at the time, like, you know, that Vader is Luke's father. I mean, there's just so much going for this movie. Yeah. And you are left, you know, like, Han's frozen in carbonite, Luke's had his arm cut off, his hand cut off, and all of these things, the Empire's gained ground, and you learn of the existence of the Emperor. Like, all of these things, like, make you feel really small. But what I love about the movie so much is it really just ends like with this little sliver, and I talk about it again at length, but the sliver of hope and this little bit of light that no matter how dark things get, there's still always a way out. There's always a little bit of light in it. And it, to me, just encompasses everything Star Wars is about, everything it stands for. And between the acting, the filming, the storytelling, I think it just checks all my marks. And there are silly parts and silly things, but it hits everything, which is why it's in my number 2 spot.
Yeah. No, I mean, even though I have it number 5, I co-sign all of that. I think it's amazing. I think and we talked about this more on the episode that'll come out next week, but just like after the high of blowing up the Death Star, the reminder of the Empire being like, yeah, that's fine. We're still going to kick your ass all over the galaxy. And like, we're going to you're going to pull off some great tricks with AT-AT walkers. That's fine. We've got 100 more of them. Like, the Battle of Hoth is just all so good. My number 2 is The Last Jedi. And it's, depending on the day, and what you'll figure out if you done this through, is that A New Hope is my number 1. The two of them go back and forth constantly. And I think it's in some ways, and I agree that like Rogue One, it's up there because it is so different from all the rest. I think, for me personally, The Last Jedi was exactly the movie that I needed, because I had grown up with A New Hope. I'd grown up with the original movies. I'd grown up with all the philosophy of, light side good, dark side bad. There is no emotion. There's only peace. Like, the once you anger, all these things are bad, 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 bad. The Jedi are great. And as I grew up, I realized, well, first of all, a lot of those things are absolutes. Sorry, Obi-Wan, but the Jedi have just as many of them. And a lot of them don't always hold true. And the world is actually a lot more of a complicated place and a lot more of a nuanced place. And things don't always work out quite as well as the original trilogy might have said they were. And to me, that's exactly what The Last Jedi is. The Last Jedi is about, let's use the reflection of the last 30 years to re-examine the original movies and say, yeah, some of it is still so true, but, maybe the Jedi texts are not page turners, as Yoda says in a line that doesn't fit Star Wars, but might still be my favorite line in all of Star Wars. Page turners, they are not. That, yeah, maybe we should question some of the Jedi lore, that maybe there are other ways to understand the Force. And I think my anger is the wrong word, but my dislike of Rise of Skywalker and my absolute love of Last Jedi are very deeply intertwined. I think it's it's because Last Jedi to me was like, okay, Star Wars was what we gave you 40 years ago. Now let's give you a new version of this story that keeps a lot of the same ideas, but puts all the critiques you've been thinking about and all the things you've been wrestling with, we're going to wrestle with them too. And so I think I just felt so seen as a Star Wars fan through that movie. And it is just, A New Hope has more of my nostalgia. It's kind of like, if I want to think deep thoughts, I watch Last Jedi. If I want to just feel exhilarated and exalted and like all this awesomeness, I watch A New Hope. And I have to rank them. So A New Hope is, being incredibly exhilarated and having fun is a little bit more fun than like Dark Journeys Through the Soul. But I do love a great Dark Journey Through the Soul. So Last Jedi is my number 2.
Alex, did you do your number 2?
I did.
Number 1.
It was Empire Strikes Back, if you didn't hear it.
I did. I just am bad at remembering the number part.
No responses to everything I just said about Last Jedi? It's fine. It's fine.
I agree with a lot of what you say. I just feel like the other movies I ranked, I like them better.
Yeah, no, we'll cut that out. It's really fine. All right, so that's all of our number 2s, and I think we figured out who is. I've been very clear with my number 1. Alex, you've been clear with your number 1. Erin, I apologize. I should have been tracking it. I haven't. What is your number 1?
Yeah, my number 1 is Rogue One.
Yeah.
God, I love it. It's just a good fucking movie. Like,
it really is.
It just is. And you both spoke on it. Like, Felicity Jones and Diego Luna just nail those characters. And all the other side characters, like Bodhi Rook, I love him. He is still one of my favorite Star Wars characters. Like, he is just the little pilot that got mixed up in the wrong stuff. And instead of just, like, escaping and leaving when he could, he was like, no, if like the things they're willing to do to me and to other people, I need to do something about it. And that's so powerful. And that's the same place that Baze and Chirrut come from after, you know, Jeddah City is destroyed. They're like, that's all we had. And this is a bigger problem. We can't keep our heads down. And that whole theme of Jin, you know, keep your head down. Like, you don't see the flag of tyranny if you're not looking up, kind of a thing. And seeing her perspective change through the movie, as reluctant as she may be, it's just incredible. Like, that was my recommitment to Star Wars. Like, The Force Awakens was great, and it got me excited about Star Wars. And then Rogue One happened, and I was like, holy shit.
Yeah.
This is Star Wars. Like, this is everything I've wanted.
Pod racing.
This is pod racing. And so, like, yeah, it's just, it's the little guy. You both already said this, but I, like, Rebels dying, it's always been kind of like red shirts. It's like, oh, bummer.
Yeah.
But actually seeing, like, every single person on the ground as a rebel has a backstory. They have a very important reason why they're here.
Yeah.
They've had suffering. They have so much to them. And it's just the idea, and I mean, in today's world, everything can seem really horrible and bad, but it's the idea of, yeah, you don't have to keep your head down. You can do something.
Yeah.
And I think that's important as a life lesson. And just on a more less important note, the bisexual inside of me was just so thrilled with those two main characters. They're both so pretty. So pretty.
Yeah.
And for some reason, I'm going to be honest, I did not see it coming that they were all going to die.
That's so silly to me.
I know. It was foreshadowed so hardcore. And of course they have to die because they're not in the, like, originals. But I was so into the movie and I was so in love with these characters. And then Bodhi dies. And I was like, oh, we lost one. But, you know, someone always has to die. And then Baze and Chirrut go down. And I'm like, I'm starting to feel less good about this. I'm not really sure where this is going.
Wow.
And then... And
Erin,
then the Death Star hits.
Erin, I'm with you. I didn't, because the thing is that they are so unremembered. Like, when they say this R2 unit has brought us the plans, no one says how. I thought it was entirely possible that one or two of them might escape and then go on to, like, you know, maybe Cassian was one of the guys in the back and on Endor, you know, like, that's the level they were. Yeah, I totally am with you. It could have been my number one as well. Just in terms of, like, the nuancey stuff that I was talking about from Last Jedi. I love what you just said about Bodhi and how he goes through all this stuff, because he goes through all this horrible way the Empire treats him, and then Saw Gerrera, like, treats him pretty horribly as well. And we know enough about Saw's story to know why, but that was also the first thing that Andor then later ran with, of like, yeah, the Empire is horrible. That doesn't mean the rebellion is all good guys and flowers and rainbows and unicorns. Like, yeah. It is just so good.
Yeah.
Last you remember what Chirrut said at Star Wars Celebration during a panel? He accidentally said that when my character dies, and he, like, spoiled it for everyone, and, like, the panel, like, froze for a minute, and everyone, like, panicked.
No, I don't remember
what?
that.
And, like, what is her name? Gwyneth, the woman who plays Captain Phasma.
Oh, Gwendolyn Christie.
Gwendolyn Christie.
Yeah, her. Thank you. She, like, was the MC, and she went, right, and, like, kind of tried to move on as quickly as possible because he just spoiled that his character died.
See,
That's funny. I actually didn't know that.
Yeah, by that point, I was solidly in my no trailers, no spoilers. I'm just gonna go in and watch the movie.
Oh, I'll watch any trailer that comes out. I won't look at spoilers, but any trailer that comes out, I will consume on repeat.
Okay.
Yeah.
You two
Real
can
quick, final thing on this.
Of course.
On Rogue One, the Vader scene.
Yeah.
It's awesome. Vader scene. Like, just the primal fear that these rebels have is something that never sunk in. And like you're saying, Alex, like, Anakin's pissed. Like, he's throwing a temper tantrum in the most horrible way. Like, he's just tearing through these rebels because he's mad.
Yeah.
And he's just playing with them, you know, throwing them around, force pulling them onto his lightsaber, doing whatever. It's just such an incredible scene, and the way that it almost exactly leads into A New Hope was just a beautiful piece of storytelling. Instead of there being this gap, it's like, no, this is the scene we all know and love from a different perspective.
It is so beautifully done that the fact that it doesn't make any sense whatsoever, you kind of forget about. And that's how good it is.
Yeah.
Alex, what's your number one? Or tell us why.
I don't have a soapbox available right now. But my unabashed number one is Revenge of the Sith. I have seen that movie probably 100 plus times. That movie is like quintessential to my actual soul and being. I think that is the most complete, perfect Star Wars movie. And my reasoning is, I mean, it has literally everything. You have, for me growing up, Ewan McGregor, Hayden Christensen were my Obi-Wan, my Anakin. And Hayden Christensen's best acting performance in the movies, by far, in that movie. He comes to his own. I can finally see how this socially awkward guy becomes this like angry, dark Sith Lord. I see the Emperor's plan fully coming into view. Ewan McGregor is at his best. You get introduced to General Grievous, who's hashed it even more in the Clone Wars, makes me love him even more. And it's also funny to me that pretty much every villain just like has this weird like sexual tension with Obi-Wan somehow, whether it's Asajj Ventress or General Grievous or Darth Maul. They all hate him, but all sort of like, I need Kenobi nearby somehow. But the opening scene, like out of all the just openings of a Star Wars film, dropping us into the battle over Coruscant, that is such an amazing, probably my favorite opening sequence of any Star Wars movie. And then like beyond that, we've seen it so many times now, and it breaks me every time, but Order 66, that, like, scarred me and left, like, a generational just mark on my soul, because you're seeing all of these Jedi who, like, for my entire childhood, I'm thinking, like, oh, the Jedi, they're the good guys, the Knights, everyone's so great, and you always wonder, like, where do they all go? Like, you're extinct, but, like, then to see the darkness of this plan, turning these clones against them, which again, the Clone Wars makes so much more intimate because, growing up with the Clone Wars as well, you just are like, oh, I know these clones. They're like best friends. I know Ki-Adi-Mundi. I know Luminara. I know Plo Koon. Like, I know their personalities, and watching them one by one get murdered by their brothers in arms, and it just makes me cry. And then you have the greatest lightsaber scene ever to be put onto a big screen. Obi-Wan and Anakin on Mustafar. That is fucking shit, is poetry in motion. I have a fucking mug that's just one letter of the dialogue between Obi-Wan and Anakin, like just one letter for every word, basically. And Elizabeth Godfrey, thinking it would take me a few minutes to get it, I opened it up and immediately started reciting the entire like dialogue between them before they started getting into the fight. The choreography, the emotion. Oh, the emotion in that battle is just, oh my God. It just gets me so excited. And so it's like Anakin, while yes, he messed up in so many ways, he's also a tragedy. And he became this because of the Jedi's mistakes, because of Palpatine's evilness, and all of the emotion in that movie just culminates in such a beautiful product that just hits so hard for me. And so it's my number one.
That's legit. Yeah. I really want to honor and respect all those perspectives. It's not how I see the movie, but it's awesome that other people do. And I think that's what's super important. And I'm really looking for, I think I put a lot more blame on Anakin, so we're going to have a really fun time talking about that. But
I put much less blame on Anakin than most people do. I'm an Anakin apologizer, and people look down on me for it.
We're gonna have some thoughts about that. We'll get to it. Yeah, we'll have some thoughts on that. And I just want to close with one really positive thing I'll say about that movie, that because I do think there's a lot of really good things in it. The visual, to me, every lightsaber battle we've gotten is pretty much always a blue or green, sometimes yellow or white, and with the exception of purple, a fairly lighter color lightsaber against a red lightsaber. Mm-hmm. That's like the standard for almost all of them. And the fact that on Mustafar, it's a blue lightsaber against a green lightsaber because the whole background is red is to me just this incredible bit of visual storytelling that I never really appreciated until one of the last times I watched it, maybe about 6 months ago. Yeah, so totally get why people love that movie so much, and I'm really looking forward to talking to you about it all. So, yeah.
We're not going into detail, but Erin, just out of pure curiosity, are you an Anakin blamer or apologizer?
Apologizer.
Thank you.
He's my baby.
Yeah. Okay. Great. I'm just happy. I'm just happy that the two children on the podcast will be able to band together on this one.
Well, I mean, we'll get into it more, but to me, I fundamentally reject the nature of that question because I think that questions like that assume that blame is zero sum. Like, and I think Anakin is at the end 100% responsible for his decisions. I think the things that were done by both Palpatine and the Jedi created the situation and that he became the person who made those decisions. And so I think there's like lots of ways.
It's so funny. This hasn't been included in the podcast, but it's so funny that you're bringing this up, Matthew, because I had an entire real life conversation, a similar vibe about capitalism. Do you blame the capitalists who have like just a product of the system, or do you blame the system itself? And it's like, where do you put the blame? So it's interesting because I think I have similar opinions in real life about like where the blame should fall as to where I blame Anakin or not blame Anakin.
Yeah. Oh, and certainly, and this is like, I just watched a Ballad of, the movie should be called Hunger Games: A Ballad of Snakes and Songbirds, because that rolls off the tongue. It's called A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Some editor failed there, right? Like, it should be the other way around. But it's a great movie. It's about how Cornelia Snow becomes President Snow. And I walked out and said, that's the best telling of the fall of Anakin Skywalker that I've ever seen. But like, to me, the very heart and soul of my superhero ethics podcast is villains, because I think there's an incredible lot of value in remembering that, and this is very much to me about Anakin. I think too often the discussion becomes, are they evil and bad, or are they the poor little meow meow and it's not their fault? And I think that there's a huge middle ground of, we can explain, we can understand, and we can even relate to the journey they take that takes them to where they are without it necessarily being justifying how they become what they are. And I think that's kind of what you're saying there. Like blame and explanation don't have to be the same conversation.
True.
So we'll get to all that.
Matthew, what's your number one?
Sorry, go ahead.
What's your number one?
Oh, A New Hope. Sorry, I thought that was pretty clear.
Yeah.
It's just, I guess I hadn't really said that, but yeah, it's my favorite movie of all time. Like, it is just, I can recite it from memory. I can recite most of the things. I will fast forward through the stuff that's not supposed to be in there because Han shoots first, and Jabba the Hutt only appears in Return of the Jedi. That's the only movie he appears in. And yeah, it's not by no means a perfect movie. You'll hear me talk much more about it on the episode we did last week or 2 weeks ago or whatever it was. But it's hands down my favorite.
Mic drop.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So those are our rankings. I was going to have us kind of go back over them, but we've gone way too long already. So I'll just say that in the show notes, include a link if you want to kind of see what all those rankings are. And it's going to be really fun to go back and let us know, it's going to be really fun to go back and see where our rankings are after we talk about all these movies. I think already we've shifted a little bit from when we first made these rankings a couple of weeks ago. And audience, most importantly, though, let us know, what are your rankings? What do you think of our rankings? Which one of us is completely wrong and you have issues with or you agree with? Let us know. You can find us. All the ways to contact us are in the show notes. Our Twitter, our email, Facebook. You can contact us individually, which is totally fine as well. Just let us know how you want to do that. I'm going to do this wrap up pretty quickly, but Erin does amazing cosplay. Alex does amazing photography. They're both awesome people. Check out all their social media. Of course, I am the Ethical Panda. I also do the Superhero Ethics Podcast. Please check out all of that. Please think about becoming a member. It's only $5 a month or $55 for the year. You get ad-free content, you get bonus content, and you support us. You help us keep the lights on because this is a labor of love, but I can't tell the people who own my mortgage that I just do labors of love. And like just, the recording equipment. I want to get Alex a new microphone. I want to help all of us get upgraded in different ways. So every little bit helps. Thank you so much. We have spoken.
Stay classy, Mustafar.
This is Pod Racing.